Hey, welcome to Span What's Due on the Lake. This is fall, obviously up here in the Northwoods. The leaves are mostly gone now. So this is video number 2 in the Magic Wand series. And this one right here is not from the Potter series. This is one that's purely in my imagination, and it's got some unique stuff there. It's got a little burl handle on it, and then a twist. And this is made out of the Dutch elm. That Dutch elm, if you've followed the channel for a couple years, you'll know came off of a tree from West Point that used to sit beside the two cannons, and it was a 200 or 300-year-old elm that got Dutch elm disease. It was probably 10 feet across at the base, and when I was stationed up at West Point, they brought it out to the hangar for us, and we had it. We sawed it up into probably 3,000 or 4,000 board foot, and I've still got probably 1,000 board foot of it. I use it for tables occasionally and other stuff. It's really not very good because it's not stable. It's cross-linked in the grain, so it's pretty strong. But if you make a table that's an inch and a half, it changes from summer to winter and warps and does all kinds of neat stuff. But it finishes up a lot like black walnut. It's got a dark, beautiful grain, really neat grain pattern. You can even see a little bit of the grain pattern in this one with the carving. So I kind of cut a wavy shape in there, and like I said, I cut when I did this probably 8 or 10 blanks because it's easier to play around with the saw. Now I wanted this to have a swirl or a twist going down it, and here's the easiest way to do it. And woodworkers have seen this trick for years. You take a piece of tape, you spin it, you put it on at an angle, whatever angle you want, and you'll notice I changed the angle at the beginning there because it wasn't wrapping where I wanted it to. And you spiral it down, and poof, you've got a perfect spiral reference pattern that you can check out if you like it or not. If you were doing 4 legs to a chair or something along those lines, or a table, this would be one way to get those 4 legs to look all the same rather than messing around with the spiral pattern. So I'm going to only mark one side of the tape because the tape is too wide for the spiral that I want to go down there. I'm going to end up with about an eighth to a quarter inch spiral on that. So I marked down one side of the tape and then pulled the tape off. That's just blue painter's tape. I keep painter's tape around. I think it works better than masking tape. So a lot of times masking tape will leave a residue when you're done with whatever you're putting it on, especially if you leave it too long. Painter's tape has a tendency to come off clean and whatnot. Now, although I will tell you, if you have ever went into an old house or bought a house or something and noticed in the corner that there's a piece of painter's tape still up on the wall and it's been there for 4 or 5 years, it will take paint off with it. It seems to set up and tear paint up. So I drew the second, just free-handed line down the side. You'll notice, just like the first video, if you watch that and then ended up with this one, that I left this pretty thick. And it's pretty thick because it's going to have that vine or whatever the twist is going to stand up about 1/8 of an inch. So I now have to, inside this spiral, which is kind of fun, carve a straight or relatively straight. Since this thing is curved and I made it curved, the same dimensions on the wand portion versus the vine, which is going to stick up proud on the outside of the wand. So that's a saber burr in there, and that's an elite Ram Elite power carver in there, and it's running about 40,000 RPM. I've said before, I've noticed Rob over at Just Carve Rob has noticed the same thing. He was talking about a couple of Kutzall bits that he was using, and just out at random they went out of round and they start vibrating. You can really tell, or I can tell anyway, with these hand pieces, because these hand pieces are finely tuned and they're really smooth. And obviously you're holding them in your hand, but you get any kind of vibration or where that bit is slightly out of round, you can really feel it in your hand. And if you're going to carve for half an hour or an hour, it's really annoying. Not to mention that in the back of your mind while it's vibrating that it's busy putting excessive wear on a bearing and the seals in there, and you're going to have to replace those. But back to the original part of the story before I got long-winded. The Kutzall bits that I bought lately, of the 5 in the last 6 months that I bought, probably 3 of them have come out of the package out of round with vibration. And when you're talking $15 a pop, that's quite annoying. And I usually buy 2 of them at a time, so I have a second one on hand, and as well as the older ones. But initially I thought it might be the collet and the handpieces because the handpieces were new. But then when I switch over to another bit, it goes back to perfectly smooth, which I like and is a lot more pleasant to carve with. So I've quit using Kutzalls. I don't know if it's the COVID thing. Obviously, Kutzall's not sponsoring me because I wouldn't badmouth their product if they were paying me. But, well, I might. But I've switched over to the saber tooth burrs lately, and they work. So if you get a burr from Kutzall, I know a lot of people like them. Jordy Johnson over at Carving Fusion, you should go check that out. You should check out Just Carve Rob. Obviously, I guess if we're pimping people, Mark the Maker in there. Uncle Kevin does some chainsaw stuff. Ryan Cook supposedly has a series coming out again. If you follow any of the chainsaw carving stuff, they get at some point a little bit into the finer carving, like those of us are, like Jordy and the rest of those guys are doing. But if you look down in there, I've got the links of all those guys down there. If you're looking for a channel, you couldn't go wrong. We all support each other. If you want to get into stuff, Mike over at Stennis Sticks, Mike doesn't crank out a whole lot of material like the rest of us knuckleheads. He takes his time and does some really beautiful stuff. So check out Mike over at Stennis Sticks. Obviously, like I said, Ryan Cook's got a show coming up, and I think the old series was Saw Dogs. That's kind of interesting to watch because he wasn't a carver then; he was an actor. So, and then he's drugged lately, Uncle Kevin, along with him. So you can see I ran down around the spiral, and now what I'm doing is trying to keep in the back of my mind where the wand portion is going to be in the middle. Now it does twist and turn, so you can't just do a straight. You've got to kind of work each piece through here in between the spiral. And I got to admit, it gets a little loopy once in a while you're doing this because you're not sure where the heck you're at with the 4 or 5 spirals going down through there. But I'm going to take the background down. I'm going to leave that vine a little bit proud. And then the handle will get that will just be straight without a whole lot more embellishment. But you can see the grain in that Dutch elm. And it's just a beautiful grain. So I've switched bits in there, and this is a white saber bit. It's in my other hand piece, the Ram iCube, which is a little bit cheaper than the other one. I think you can get that for $300, and I bought that initially to replace a couple of the old ones. And if you're a subscriber, you know why I had to replace those. If you're not, you'll have to subscribe and go way back to last April, I guess, to figure out the rest of the story in that. So this is a white one, and it turned out to be an 1/8 inch bit. I don't know why I ordered an 1/8 inch instead of a 3/32. So they're starting to take shape, and it's got kind of a neat thing going on. And you can see where that tape really came into play to make those spirals somewhat symmetrical. So here, this was a freehand design. It was I had a little bit of an idea where I wanted to go with it. So now I'm putting a little knurl on the end of the handle there. And I'm going to go down the side of the spiral the part that I'm going to leave proud, with the burner, just to give it a really nice delineated cut line. I like to use the burner, and I use it a lot. For those of you who have watched before, I use it as a stop cut to some degree. And then secondary, it kind of highlights what's going on there. Most of the burn portion will go away, but it gives me a really fine control over what would normally be a stop cut or a V gouge cut in there. And I'm able to go right up to that line and get a real clean corner or edge. And I won't torture you, but I went all the way down the spiral there on both sides. I'm using the second of the 2 pins. I like to run 2 burner pins, and I like to run 2 carvers. And the reason for that is one, this one has, like I said, an 1/8 inch collet in it. A lot of bits come in 1/8 inch. I don't use the 1/4 inch. They're more for die grinders and the larger stuff. And then the third size is 3/32, which is a little bit finer, and I use that in the more expensive Oz Plus carver. A more aggressive bit typically works better with the 1/8 inch, and then the finer detail bits are typically 3/32. And if you've ever tried to change a collet in these things, or if you're using a Dremel, you have to swap the bits out. These are click collets, so you just twist the handpiece and place it in there. But if you've got a Dremel 4000 or something like that, they've got the chuck on the end of it. And to me, it's a pain in the butt to stop what you're doing and change to another bit, because like woodworking, if anybody remembers, I don't remember the name of them, but they had a machine in the old days for hobbyists. There was a woodworking, it was a complete setup. And again, I can't remember the name of it. Somebody will tell me in there. I've said this before, and a whole bunch of people popped up with it. But you got a system that turns into a table saw, turns into a sander, turns into a lathe, that sort of thing. But you have to reconfigure it, and it took about 5 or 10, 15 minutes to change it out. And if you were building something, for example, if you're building a table, you got 3 legs perfectly cut while you had it configured one way. You missed something on the 4th leg, then you took 15, 20 minutes, changed crap out, started to go to the next step, and then you noticed that, oh my God, I need to go back. So then you take 15 or 20 minutes or half hour and change it back to the original configuration just to make that one cut. And I find that with the burrs, I'll be messing around with one burr and then switch. And then I'm like, oh man, I missed a section here. I need to go back to that other burr. And I'm too lazy to mess around with changing collets. So here's a unique way to, this comes out and reads really well. It's kind of like a burl with holes in it. And the goal to this is to randomize these holes. Some of them smaller, some of them a little bit bigger. And then I'll do a couple of things. I'll elongate a few holes as we get into the rest of it, but it comes out really nice. You can see it makes a nice presentation. And I do have a little bit more work to do in the middle there, and I will on the wand portion to clean that up. I'm not trying to make it perfect. I want it to read like it was a handmade piece. And again, last video I talked about, if you were to turn these, you look at wands, and I did a lot of research on wands just to get an idea on shapes and stuff. I do that on Google, obviously, and then I save them to my iPad as a photo and a reference photo. So there it is, pretty much in the done configuration. This is probably one of my favorites. When you get 7, 8 of these laying there and you're picking them up, you'll find that 1 or 2 of them you'll like a lot better than the others. I went back away from the Watkins Danish oil, and now I'm back to my old standard, which is the shellac. I love the amber shellac because it leaves a really interesting, it kind of does a stain function because it has the amber in it versus the clear. The secondary reason is I can put 2 or 3 coats on this and then sand in between them with steel wool, 4-0 steel wool. In these cases, they only took one coat. And this stuff will dry in 15 or 20 minutes, and you can grab some steel wool and move on to the next step, which would be a little bit of paste wax on there, or floor wax, for lack of better reference. What I've got now is some furniture wax, But the Johnson paste wax for floors does the same trick, and a can will last you 20 years if you put the lid back on. So I'm just throwing this on there with the shellac, and that will be the end of that one. I don't think I filmed this after I waxed it. So, but this is kind of what you'll see. It'll be a little bit duller because I'll take the shine off of it, and then I'll take that steel wool and run over it until it's smooth, and then I'll wax it. So this is number 2. There's a whole bunch of the other wands that were done. Up in there you can see Ron Weasley's. There's the Elder wand if you're a Potter fan. Professor Snape's wand is in there, in that grouping, and those are all finished, and I've got videos that'll be coming out on most of those soon, until you guys tell me to stop. And then there's a couple freehand wands in there. So this has been number 2 of the wand series, and there's a whole bunch of them. I went ahead and made a bunch of boxes for the presentation because they're going to go down to Madison to a gallery down there, and they rather than just a wand laying on a shelf on a display or whatever, I thought it'd be neat to do boxes. So I figured out how to do the boxes. There is a video of the boxes, so if you haven't by now, you like what you see on here, by all means you can help the channel out by subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey, thanks a lot. This has been Ben with Studio on Lake.